the last time we had a conversation, Jeremy, the last time you came on, not too long ago, I wanted to show you a book and I couldn't find it, and I found it now. So just hold on. You guys carry on. I'll get the book and I'll show you.
So, besides being sick and well, hopefully, like you get better much sooner than later. It's nothing major, but you're on there for a little bit near the end of one of the shows that we were having, and we got into such a really cool discussion about astral projection, kind of lucid dreaming, and trying.
Is that the Donald Tyson?
It is Donald Tyson, yeah. You have that book? No? It's a great book.
I have his 13 Zodiac one that's related to the Necronomicon stuff. He put out like 3 books or something like that. On the
I think I have that one too. The 13 Gates of the Necronomicon.
Tarot. But I don't have that Alhazred book.
It's a good read. I recommend you pick it up.
The 13 Zodiac one, it was okay, but it was more of like a reference book. It wasn't like a book that you just sit and kind of read through to get.
Well, this is a story, right? Well, I mean, it's a story about Hazred, who he is, and writing the Necronomicon kind of thing. So it's a story. It's Donald Tyson's version of how he came to be, kind of deal.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Intriguing. Yeah, that's cool. Donald Tyson. I'm not familiar with him.
He's a Canadian author, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, as long as he's still there, I don't know, but he lived in Maritime.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's put out a bunch of good books. A little bit of an iconoclast. He doesn't always go with the mainstream version of things, but his book, Enochian Magic for Beginners,
Mm-hmm.
cool. He goes really in depth on that. His book, New Millennium Magic, really good. Really good. It used to be the New Magus or something like that. I can't remember the original title, but then it got updated like a long, long time ago. It goes through numbers, geometric shape, and their association with different magical tools. I thought that he did an amazing job. And especially, he goes over a method of tracing the pentagram in the air that makes so much more sense than the way that the Golden Dawn did it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was this co-Masonic order that had magic in it back in like the 1800s, I think it was.
Yeah, it was like mid to late 1800s.
And they had a ton of poets and artists involved in their organization. Their form of magic influenced so much after that. What they put together as a system of magic has influenced modern ritual magic. Like, you can't even understate how much. But they had this convoluted way of drawing the pentagrams for the different invoking or banishing of the different elements associated with the different points on the pentagram. And it was, tortured and convoluted. And Donald Tyson has an alternate version of it in that book, New Millennium Magic, that makes way more sense. I think what he does is he just starts at the point that represents the element, and then you just draw clockwise from there if you're invoking it, or counterclockwise if you're banishing it.
I gotta pick me up with a copy of that book.
Yeah.
I have to pick myself up a couple of those books.
Mm-hmm.
They both sound pretty cool.
Beginning guide to scrying as well.
Scrying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that includes some of the most detailed instructions I've ever seen on using a crystal ball for scrying, for example.
Wow. Have you ever scryed?
I've done some scrying, but not the crystal ball style that he described.
Yeah.
In the Golden Dawn, to them, scrying was basically using some sort of image, usually a symbol, as a gateway for astral projection, basically, or mental projection. It wasn't necessarily full-on, fully immersive in the astral realm, losing complete awareness of your body. Sometimes you can do what's called mental projection. It's basically like daydreaming, like really daydreaming, where you don't You lose awareness of your physical body exactly. You don't like pop out into that full reality. You're still a little bit aware of your body. You can just open your eyes whenever you want. That's mental projection, and so um, I've done that kind of scrying before.
Did you have any success with it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what kind of an experience did you have with it?
Well, encountering entities.
Oh wow. Okay. So now I'm intrigued. You encountered some entities.
You
Yeah,
piqued his curiosity.
Yeah.
yeah. So like demonic entities,
Ooh.
and you can do what some people would describe as shamanic soul retrieval,
Okay.
where an aspect of your psyche has kind of gotten broken off and estranged from your sense of self, I guess you could call it.
So
And
how would you know that? How would you know if a piece of your psyche or whatever is straight and you want to like reconnect it? How would you know?
yeah, well, for example, a lot of the ones that I did were first encountered in a dream. Where
Okay.
I would be in a regular dream and some sort of entity, usually like a monstrous looking entity, would be malevolent towards me, the
Hmm.
primary dream character in the dream. And then later I would go and I would call up that entity and interrogate it or kind of explore what they were about and what they wanted. And sometimes you end up with a very cathartic release and an integration kind of moment where you recognize something about yourself that you were trying hard not to notice, and you can begin a process of healing yourself, your own psyche, by reintegrating that part to recognize that it is a part of yourself and to try and figure out a way to give it a healthy expression.
Wow, that's yeah.
That can be scary.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You know.
you got to be gentle with yourself with that kind of work because if you expose yourself to too much of these buried and suppressed traumas, really, aspects of yourself that kind of got sharded off through trauma, it's suppressed for a reason.
Hmm.
It's to kind of protect your psyche from damage, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's like the function of the shadow. It protects your mind from truths or knowledge that you aren't quite ready to process. Because at the time that you encountered that information or that realization or whatever or experience, um, it was traumatic, which means that you didn't have the mental or emotional faculties to process it properly at the time.
Hmm.
A lot of these traumas are actually from our childhood, and as adults, we've developed those more mature tools to process uh, difficult situations. And so we don't go back usually and process those suppressed trauma, and they just sit there festering, using up, life force,
Hmm.
maintain itself, to maintain the workarounds that prevent you from kind of re awakening that realization.
Yeah, well, it's funny how well, it's not funny how you say it. It's interesting how you say that, as we get older, we sort of bring in the adult tools to sort of better understand it. But do you think that, as we grow older, we mature out of childhood and into teenage and then adultism or whatever? Do you think we also lose a better understanding of we might have understood when we were kids? Like, I mean, you constantly hear that we're so much more open and aware of things because we don't have those filters, domestications, if you will. that adultism sort of brings, like, oh well, I like the color blue, but no, I like purple. You're told, no, you have to wear blue,
Yeah,
sort of thing.
so there's a couple things going on there. Where one thing is that these various different traumas that have created workarounds in your mind or complexes around them that prevent you from revisiting it or prevent you from being re-traumatized. A lot of times they become crystallized and you actually start to identify yourself with these traumas and the workarounds that have built up around them.
Mhm.
You get locked into certain behaviors and you can't see outside of the reality tunnel that it creates. But also just the way that our mind works by being able to identify meaningful patterns in the data stream that's coming in. If something has been deemed as unimportant or not meaningful, it gets filtered out. But that's a process that takes time. And eventually, different things start getting filtered out because it's been deemed to be irrelevant by
Yeah.
the subconscious processing of your mind. Whereas when we're younger, it hasn't necessarily been deemed irrelevant yet.
Well, let me ask you a loaded question. Is that real life? Is that why we're here?
Well, that's you're asking. You're getting into the meat of what I wanted to talk about today.
Exactly.
So I've got a lot of experience lucid dreaming,
Yeah.
and it's had a huge transformative impact on my psyche and the way I look at the world.
Mm-hmm.
Had a bunch of different experiences within dreams and within the waking realm, and in between. Have led me to certain realizations and certain ways of looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I've come to the point where I basically feel like anything that you are experiencing, whether it be what we refer to as the waking experience or what we refer to as dreaming,
Mm-hmm.
or astral travel or out of body experience,
Yeah.
any of those experiences, if you're having an experience, then you're in some sort of dream. Like right now, we're having a dream.
Mm.
We're experiencing something right now, and that means that we're in a dream of some type of. And there's different ways you can check which type of dream you're in, because there's slightly different rules that govern the different types of dreams. I kind of wanted to do a thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you heard of the idea that our minds are more like a receiver, like a radio or something?
Yeah.
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 I believe Nikola Tesla talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some source of truth in the universe, and that his mind is just a receiver of that. And he doesn't know where it is exactly, but he knows that it exists. Picture your mind as a receiver, like a television, for
Mm-hmm.
example. You know, the television has two channels that you can easily change between. And one of them is labeled with a symbol with the sun. The other one is labeled with a symbol of the moon. And there's also an on-off switch. Instead of a TV that you're sitting in front of watching with your eyeballs or whatever, imagine it's fully immersive virtual reality, near perfect,
Mm-hmm.
multi-sensory, olfactory, kinesthetic, gustatory, visual, auditory, all that. And instead of somebody physically in a body sitting in a virtual reality machine or whatever, it's directly being beamed to your mind. You've got this virtual reality that you can tune into either the solar channel or the lunar channel.
Hmm.
Now, in the mainstream interpretation of what's going on here, the solar channel is the real world, the lunar channel is just dreams. That's kind of how our culture sees these things by default, right?
Yeah.
The dreamer perspective or the oniranaut perspective. Oniranaut is just a word that means like a traveler within the dream realm.
Okay.
So the dreamer perspective would be that both channels are just as real or unreal as each other.
Hmm.
That both are simulations, but they're just based off of two different data sets.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of different interpretations within that as well.
Yeah, I bet. And that's what I want to ask. It's like, okay, so the two of them are simulations. Then were these simulations were their origins? I mean,
Right.
if they're simulations, then what are they like? Where did they come from? Like, what are they based upon?
You're right, exactly. So the most popular interpretation of this would be that the solar channel is generated from data coming from our physical sense organ,
Hmm.
the
Okay.
real physical body that exists.
Mhm.
And that's what appears to be the case. You know, it appears as though right now we have an eyeball, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And you know, light coming off of various objects, a screen, for example, in front of your face. Some of the light, a tiny portion of the light coming off the screen gets into your eyeball, into the lens,
Mhm.
hits the rods and cones on the back of your retina. And if the light is within a certain bandwidth of frequencies and within a certain range of intensities, it will trigger those rods and cones to fire an electrochemical signal down the optic nerve into the brain.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
then that raw data is processed by the mind to look for meaningful patterns within it. And then when it finds meaningful patterns within that data set, it encodes them into a symbolic representation of that meaningful pattern and presents it to the conscious point of awareness as a fully immersive virtual reality experience.
Hmm.
And with all the senses, not just the eye. And that's what the solar channel is. And then the lunar channel is presumably a data set from internal data. So this would be from memories, especially recent memories.
Yeah.
And according to science, random firings of the neurons in your brain that occur while you're sleeping, especially from the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
And they call it random because they don't know where they're coming from. They appear random to scientific observation.
Hmm.
When we're asleep and dreaming, right?
Yeah.
And now, according to mainstream science, that processing is happening in the physical brain in the solar realm.
In the solar realm. Okay.
But there's some issues with that concept because in the dream,
Yeah.
when we're in that dream, if we stop to think about it, we believe that the eyeball in our dream is also
It's reality.
light in the dream, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. We know that something on a higher dimensional level is generating everything, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Everything in the dream is being processed by some higher order dimension, right? Which is presumably your waking brain or your physical brain in the solar realm. It's getting convoluted already, but
That's fine. I mean, to simplify it a little bit, I guess, is, something simple like saying my perception of a scenery would be different from your perception of a scenery, and same with Alex. But our perception may not be correct. There may be something else going on. What do we need to see it properly, per se?
lucidity,
Lucidity. Yes. Okay.
awareness, right? So
Awareness.
you're aware of the nature of the reality that you're being presented with. So right now, let's presume that we're in a solar experience right now.
Hmm.
The solar channel and the lunar channel are both dreams or simulation. We're not directly experiencing a red apple when we look at a red apple. We're experiencing a symbolic representation of a meaningful pattern that our brain has identified previously as meaningful, and then symbolically encoded that as the experience of red in the shape of an apple that gets presented to our conscious point of awareness. We look at a screen, we see the screen, but really there's no such thing as red in reality. There are frequencies and patterns and things like that the data we're getting access to, and then we're encoding part of that data that we determine as meaningful as the experience that gets generated. Now, that experience generator aspect of the mind is the same experience generator that produces the waking experience as a dreaming experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, both are dreams, really. But one is a dream that is based off of presumably physical sense organ data.
Mm-hmm.
The other is a dream based off of internal data.
Well, let me ask you this, then. Just throw this in there for just for the heck of it. Are we the AI that we fear?
Like, has it already happened?
Are we the thing that we fear in the future? Are we actually it?
Yeah, maybe. I do feel like it is a simulation of some sort. I like to use the word dream because when you say simulation, we automatically assume that there's some sort of physical computer type thing that has been created by, to us, what we think of as future humans that are running an ancestor simulation, and that we are simulated entities that believe themselves to be true because it's just really powerful simulation. But maybe the universe itself is a computational process. It's a computer in that sense, a naturally occurring computer. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, well, think of this. This is another thought experiment. So when you are in a dream and you see a wooden table, if you stop and think about it, you will look at that table and you'll be like, okay, at one point, a tree grew and it got harvested, turned into lumber, and either a craftsman or a factory turned that lumber into a table, and then got to where it physically is right now, where I'm looking at it, right? And it has that whole history behind it, but none of it actually happened. That table simply manifested spontaneously in the moment, right? It doesn't have any real history. The whole past of that table, if you stop and think about it, the past will be manifested for it if you think about it, right? If you're like, okay, well, where'd that table come from? Well, a whole history of it will get manifested for it in that moment. An entire past for it, right, will spontaneously manifest for it because it didn't exist before. It just was there, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at it, we rely on tangibility, right? I mean, that's a given. The physicality of the world, of everything that comes with it, we rely on it. I mean, if we don't see it, it's not true, sort of thing. It's not real.
Right.
And then, but when you look down to the molecules of the physical world, they're not physical.
Right.
They're not physical in the sense where, look at, I've got a table in front of me, but if you look down to the neurons or the molecules, they're moving so slow or so fast or whatever else, creating this solid sort of texture that we think is physical. That's real.
Like a field.
Like a field. If we're able to control that and manipulate that, now we're talking. Are we getting into the metaphysical sort of aspect of things here?
Yeah. Now, think about this. If you're in a regular dream,
Yeah,
you believe to be a waking experience while you're having it, right? Which is generally what most dreams are. In most dreams, we accept the reality that we're being presented with as real physicality. Whatever is presented to our mind as an experience gets generally accepted, no matter how ridiculous. It's because that's that same function of the mind that takes a data stream and renders it into an experience that presents it to your mind. But like I was saying, it's from a different data stream. So it's either from what we believe to be our physical sense organs or from some sort of internal material. Now, one interpretation is that essentially that when we're on the solar channel, that we're tapping into some sort of collective realm, that more than one conscious entity is participating in, co-creating, like you and I, like all of us that are here witnessing and experiencing and participating in this conversation. We all have our own independent sentience. When we're on the solar channel, we're in a multiplayer server. Whereas when we're in the lunar channel, we are in like a solo player experience where everything in the dream within the lunar dream is all within our own mind. Everything that you see in a lunar experience or when you're asleep and dreaming is an aspect of your own psyche. There's another school of thought where both the solar and the lunar are both collective realms, but they're just different bandwidths of reality. You've got the slower frequencies that represent what we think of as the physical world. But then if you look at the band of frequencies right above it, then you get into the astral, what I've been referring to as the lunar. A lot of people believe to be a collective realm as well, that it's not all just within your own head, that there are entities with their own independent sentience in those astral realms as well. Now, there is a caveat that most of the time when you enter into a dream, you're in a realm of the astral that is generated by your own internal psyche, right? Almost everything that you experience within that part of the astral is your own psyche. But you can travel to other dreamlands that are other parts of the earth, that are even beyond, that are extraterrestrial dreamlands that you can enter, a collective realm that is part of the astral that you can access. Some people will refer to that as an astral projection, whereas a dream is where you're still locally within your own psyche.
You know, the terminology, this is mind-boggling. No, you know, ITC, the ITC,
The lunar channel. You're in nocturnal frequencies.
yeah, exactly.
We're always on the lunar channel here.
Yeah, we're always on the lunar channel. But you know, there was a group in a research group in the UK, I believe, ITC, and they were doing a lot of audio a frequency sort of work and especially with you know, electric voice phenomenon. And they were patching into some interesting stuff. Now, is it real? Who knows? It by all means, it seems like it's real. It's not a forgery, fake, or anything like that. One of the researchers had passed away, and they kept gearing some of the audio experimentation towards reaching out to this particular researcher who had passed away. Okay, look at, maybe we can make contact with this guy. But they had no luck. But they were able to record conversations with a researcher who was telling them how the life structure was. And the life structure was that you guys now currently are in a sort of a purgatory state. You're not experiencing what is known as real life. It isn't until you pass away, you die, and you transition into what he was calling the real world, the real life, what you'll experience, what it's all about once you transition through. And, you know, I kind of find that fascinating because of what you're saying with the, you know, the perceptions and the in the channels and all that kind of stuff. And it makes you wonder, like, yeah, is this just a simulation?
Right.
You
So
know?
that brings us to the on-off switch on the TV,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So
Okay.
we're not always having an experience. There are times when, for example, deep dreamless sleep,
Okay.
where we're not having an experience at all. No, there's no experience being generated by the mind. We're in what you could call the void. No experience generator is turned on. There's no data stream being processed. We are just kind of existing as pure mind without the crutch of an experience. And we are so used to processing experiences and having that define our existence that when we exist as just pure mind without an experience to latch onto,
Mm-hmm.
we generally just kind of lose consciousness. We're not able to be consciously present or lucid within the void generally. Once in a while it happens for some people on a very rare occasion by accident.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it can be very uncomfortable. I suspect that sometimes when we have that falling experience just after falling asleep, and then you jerk out of it.
Falling off the bike sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's because we enter the void and that lack of feeling of gravity
Okay.
feels like weightlessness. It feels like we're falling. And that's jarring and that'll wake us up sometimes. So I think there's two things happening there when we wake ourselves up from the falling. I think sometimes it's because we had a dream that we fell or tripped.
Yeah.
Our body hasn't shut off the movement yet. But I think sometimes it's because we enter into the void and that lack of experience, that lack of feeling gravity pulling our bodies down feels like weightlessness, feels like falling, and then be like, oh, and wake up from that. So I think sometimes we do get that brief experience of the void that way. If you look at some really advanced dream work and sleep yogas of Tibet, they have practices that teach a person how to eventually be able to be consciously present during the void. They call it dreams of clear light. To them, the void is not just darkness, it's just pure light. That's how they describe it. I think it can be described either way equally, because light and dark, either one of those is an experience in itself. And it's just a way for our brain to kind of express that lack of experience. But we don't have words to describe that lack of experience. So we just say, just pure light, a field of pure light, or complete darkness, whatever your predilection is. They refer to it as clear light. I like to refer to it as the void. But you can be lucid within the void and you're just existing as pure mind without having an experience.
No.
That void is possibly the point where we come closest to base reality.
Can we use the lucid dreaming to sort of clear out the cache, if you will, to reset, to declutter the junk that's there that's causing us not to understand what is really going on?
Yeah, I think so. When you are in a regular non-lucid dream, you are reacting to the stimulus mainly by instinct through your programmed predilections and habits. You're just playing it out based off of whatever kind of stimulus you get, right? Some monster runs at you, growling, you run away, just instinctively. You don't want to get hurt, right? Because you think that it's happening in a physical sense, or that there are consequences to what you're experiencing, right? But then if you suddenly realize that you're in a dream,
Yeah.
then all sorts of things that you thought were literally impossible just seconds ago now become potentially even easy, right? Like you could, if you can not only recognize that you're dreaming, but also the deeper you understand the implications of that, the more control you'll have in the dream. So some people will be like, oh, okay, well, this is a dream. So I can manifest a gun and I can shoot at that monster so that it doesn't hurt me, right? Well, that's one level. But then another level is realizing that the monster can't really hurt you anyways. And so you could just let it maul you to death and see what happens. It doesn't matter, right? It's another level of freedom and understanding, beyond just simply recognizing that you're in a dream. You understand the implications of it, that perhaps that monster represents a part of your psyche that has become estranged from your sense of self, right? That the dream character that you're playing just represents one aspect of your own mind, your own psyche, and that everything else in the dream also represents an aspect of your psyche that you just simply don't identify with.
Yeah.
You know?
There's that little dark corner. And I don't want it to escape.
Right.
Keep it there. Keep it there.
Right. So one of the things that I started doing when I was having a ton of lucid dreams, especially when I was in high school, I started really doing it like all the time. So much of my focus was on attaining lucidity, and I would do practices during the day, like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I had a big boom of all these things. The more I experienced them,
Mm-hmm.
the more I started to realize it's not just irrelevant in a dream, that there are real consequences to things that happen in the dream. Because
Yeah.
if, say, for example, if a dream character represents an aspect of my own psyche,
Mm-hmm.
I treat that dream character poorly, then what am I doing to my own mind, right?
Yeah.
What message is that sending? What kind of damage am I doing to my own psyche? Also, you can heal your psyche if you realize that. So one of the things that I used to do is I would become lucid in the dream.
Yeah.
You just start looking around for the darkest, scariest place to go. Like if I found a cave, or if I was in a house, I would go into the basement,
Yeah.
look for a dark crawl space under the
Your
stairs,
worst
right?
nightmare.
And I would try and see if I could find monsters. And then I would project unconditional love towards that monster.
Oh, okay. That's
That
interesting. Yeah.
as an aspect of myself that I
So
rejected at some point.
so you would not try to project any fear at all. You didn't want to do that. You did not want to let your defenses down, sort of thing. You wanted to extend unconditional love, sort of thing, towards this unknown, crazy sort of entity, if you will.
Yeah, like even full on demonic entities, right?
Yeah.
Like I had encounters with entities that I would describe as Leviathan and
Oh, okay.
Beelzebub, you know.
Oh no, we're gonna be cursed here. You said that name. uh,
Um, but some of these were hard nuts to crack. Some of them had a lot of resistance, and it would take a lot of. I couldn't necessarily do it all within the dream, because sometimes you
yeah.
just wake up. But then I would go back and I would do like a mental projection or an astral projection where I would intentionally call forth that entity, like a spirit evocation, like a classic.
And this is when you were a kid?
This is when I was a teenager, yeah.
Oh, like, I mean, what teenager really thinks about doing stuff like that, though? Honestly,
Apparently, Jeremy does.
well, no, that is cool, though. That is really neat that you're doing this kind of stuff so young. But it just shows you the level of intelligence that one would have to understand this kind of stuff.
So, well, I had another dream where I like to share this one, where I was in a dream and I was sitting across from another dude,
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation about
Yeah,
something philosophical, like we're having right now, right?
yeah, yeah.
And during the conversation, I became lucid. I realized that I was having this within a lunar dream.
Oh, okay.
Being a polite Canadian as I am, I waited for my turn to speak. And when he finished his thought, I said, this might be a little bit off topic, but do you realize that we're in a dream right now? And then he was like, and he thought about it for a second, and he looked back at me and he said, okay, well, if this is a dream, is this
Mhm.
a dream or is this my dream? The dream character said this, and I was like, whoa, you know, taken
That's
back.
intense.
I had to think about it, and I didn't know the answer, and I was like, well, how would I even be able to answer this in, my desperation of not knowing how to answer this question? I just kind of threw the question upwards towards this, whatever, my higher self or whatever you want to call it. I hate that term, but
Mm.
you know it's hard to describe what I did, but I basically threw the question up towards some other part of my mind, right? And I was like, help. And it's like I got an answer. It came to me and it clicked, like an epiphany. And I was like, ah. And I said, if this is a dream, then it's just as much your dream as it is my dream, because
Mhm.
we have one. And then he thought about it for a second. And then he had an epiphany. He was like, ah. And as soon as he did that, all of a sudden our minds, our consciousness united,
Yeah.
and we were able to kind of see out of each other's eyes in this 360 panoramic view of space that we were sitting facing each other, having a conversation in. And I woke up in that state. I got up, had to go to work. I got up and I got on the subway in Toronto. This is like in my early 20s.
Mhm.
And I get on the subway and I'm looking around at everybody and I'm starting to think, how much of that is true during the solar dream as well, during the waking experience.
Yeah.
And are we all dream characters within a larger dream? You could say God's dream, for lack of a better term. Then each of us is a dream character within that. And within that dream, each of those dream characters can have their own internal dreams, right?
It's like Inception.
Like Russian nesting dolls. So you would have like a symbol of the sun, and then within it you could have a symbol of the moon, and that would be a good symbol to represent that theory.